Well, I think we can get started. Well, hello and welcome to Trowel Talk Live. Catherine Deasley is one of our more experienced master gardeners. Over the past 40 years of gardening and countless new homes, she has encountered a range of soil types. Along the way, she has learned that compost is the best way to improve aeration in clay or to improve water retention in sandy soils. So she's happy to share her knowledge with you today. And I, for one, am looking forward to learning even more about good compost techniques. Thank you, Catherine. Over to you.
All right. Well, welcome to everybody that's joining us today. I'm Zooming from the shores of the Ottawa River, where I'm in an area that has rather sketchy internet. So I'm going to stop my video when I start the presentation, and I'll turn it on again when we have the questions. So for now, I'm going to do my screen share. And now I can't seem to stop my video, but anyway, we will proceed. Welcome to the presentation, Compost, Worth Its Weight in Gold. Composting can be as basic as heaping organic materials in a pile, and eventually they will break down. However, the nutrient levels in that compost may not be ideal. By understanding the basics of composting and controlling the ingredients, you'll be able to maximize the speed that it breaks down and the quality of your compost. So let's get started. Okay, and now I want to go to the next screen, but it's not allowing me to do that. There we go, click. So the overview of today's talk, we're going to talk of some keywords, the benefits of composting, what exactly is composting, what you need to get started, maintaining your compost, using finished compost, and composter styles, how to avoid problems and pests, and resources. I'll have a slide at the end, and also we'll have the time for your questions. So keywords in composting: aerobic. This is organisms living in the presence of oxygen. Anaerobic is organisms living where oxygen is absent. CN ratio is the proportion of carbon materials to nitrogen materials. A cold, slow, or passive pile is a pile where there's little to no turning, operates at cooler temperatures, and takes more time. A hot, fast, active pile is turned often and has high temperatures, and you will get compost in a shorter period of time. So the benefits of compost: it provides nutrients in a form that plants can use. It will enrich your soil health by adding microorganisms and improving your soil food web. It builds soil structure, improving drainage in clay soils and increasing water holding ability in sandy soil, which means you'll have less watering to do and happier plants. And best of all, it's free. So what is composting? It's a natural process that recycles kitchen and yard waste into an organic fertilizer and soil amendment. The goal of a compost pile is to provide proper conditions in which a microherd of composting organisms thrive and break down the ingredients. Composting organisms need carbon and nitrogen, moisture, and oxygen. The basic ingredients that these composting organisms need to eat is carbon, which is usually brown condition and it's non-living. And these are things like fall leaves, shredded paper, cardboard, straw, Not hay, because hay contains too many seeds that will start growing in your gardens. Chopped corn cobs and stalks, branches, wood chips, and sawdust. And then the other ingredient is nitrogen type, and they are usually green and in a fresh state. So there you'll have your vegetable and fruit waste, your coffee grounds and filters, tea bags, eggshells, untreated fresh grass clippings, garden waste, including weeds without seeds, and animal manures, but not pet waste. The carbon to nitrogen ratio is the ratio, obviously, of carbon, the proportion of carbon to nitrogen that the microorganisms are feeding. You want to target between 25 to 30% to 1. A general rule of thumb is 3 parts brown carbon to 1 part green nitrogen. The photo that I have here, it shows a visual of that rule of thumb. So for the 1 bucket of vegetable and fruit waste, I would be adding the 3 parts of the brown. So this is an important aspect of composting, that if you don't get that combination right, you can be experiencing problems. So here's some carbon to nitrogen ratios of common ingredients that go in to give you an idea of what you're putting in. So in our high carbon materials side, we've got leaves that are, depending on the state of the leaf and the type of leaves, they'll be 40 to 1 to 80 to 1. Straw is 50 to 150 to 1. Newspaper, 400 to 900 to 1. And cardboard is about 600 to 1. And then on the vegetable waste side, you can see what they are, and I can't really read them right now, but because my screen is being blocked. But the vegetable waste is about 10 to 20, I believe. The fruit waste is 20 to 1 and higher. And when I looked at this chart, I was surprised to see how much different value that the fruit waste has compared to the vegetable waste. Coffee grounds and your grass clippings. If you want more information on this, the Cornell site has very good details of all kinds of what your components, carbon to nitrogen ratios are. But generally speaking, this just gives you an idea. So feeding your compost, the size of the ingredients that you put in matters. So smaller materials break down faster. So you want to chop them up. You want to aim for the size of your hand or smaller. And you want to store leaves or other brown materials to be adding to the nitrogen parts that you're putting in. So in the photo here where I have the materials being cut up, you'll see that there's an avocado pit. You do not need to cut things like avocado pits. They're so hard, you're going to cut yourself or cause an injury. So just leave the avocado pits. They'll take a little bit longer to break down, but they will break down nonetheless. The evergreens bits that you see, those are chopped up fine, and they will break down probably in a year or 2. So getting set up, you need to locate the bin in a convenient location to the kitchen, because that's where most of your source is coming from. You want to be near a water source, and you need room to move around, and preferably room where you can move a wheelbarrow around. You want to set up storage for the brown carbon source, because remember, for every bucket of kitchen waste that you're putting in 3 buckets of the brown carbon source. So that takes quite a bit of storage space. When you start a pile, start with a 4 to 6 inch base of coarse brown materials like twigs and wood chips. And this is to provide aeration starting at the bottom of the pile. You add to the pile in layers of browns and greens. The layers do not have to be evenly dispersed. And you can add soil or finished compost at any stage, which introduces soil organisms to the compost. It speeds the decomposition and it deters pests and odors. So managing moisture is going to keep those composting organisms happy. Ideally, you want 40 to 60% moisture content in your pile. That should be approximately similar to a wrung out sponge. If it's too dry, microbial activity slows down and stops working. And if it's too wet, the anaerobic conditions start to make your compost smell. So if you have these, you know that you need to make some adjustments. So troubleshooting, if it's dry, you're going to add water. Add water slowly though, so that it has time to percolate through the compost. If it's too wet, add the browns, the carbon source. You can also stir it up and aerate it if you're finding it's too wet, which will increase the airspace in your compost and help things dry out. And to test the moisture, take a handful and squeeze it. It should form a ball and leave your hand barely moist. When is it ready? Well, it may take 1 season or longer, depending on the ingredients that you've put in it. But hopefully it's taken maybe 4 to 6 months, you'll have compost. It should be dark brown, crumbly, and earth smelling. Also, when the pile has shrunk to 1/3 of the original volume is an indication that it's ready. When there's no major recognizable ingredients in it. You can sift the compost to remove any large materials, because as we were saying, some materials take longer to break down, like those avocado pits or the woody material. So you can still use it. You don't necessarily have to sift it. Those will continue to break down when you put it in the garden to use it. But you should make note that unfinished compost may rob nitrogen from your plants, because those decomposing organisms need the nitrogen and they'll take it when it's in the garden location. So using finished compost, you can apply compost at any time of year. You can use it on vegetables and annuals. And for this, you put 2 to 4 inches on the soil surface at planting time. And you do not need to till the compost or incorporate it heavily into the soil. There's been much research done over the years that shows the damage that we do when we till our gardens. So minimal tilling is the best thing that you can be doing for your garden for many reasons. But for the compost, lay it on top, and the organisms in the soil, like earthworms and beetles and things like that, are going to bring the compost that you've put on top down to the roots where it's needed. You can also apply it to vegetables and annuals during the growing season as a mulch or a side dressing. For lawns, you can spread 2 inches on top to rejuvenate, or when you're aerating your lawn, or when seeding a new lawn or overseeding. For trees, shrubs, and perennials, use it as a top dressing and apply it over where you think the root zone is of the plants. It's great to use in containers. You can mix 1 part of the compost to 2 parts of the soilless mix that is used for containers, which means that you do not have to use new soilless mix every year for your containers. You can recycle it and refresh it by mixing in the compost. Oh, it just seemed to have gone the wrong direction. Why is it going that way? Computers. Okay. Oops, we didn't do that one. Soil organic matter. Soil organic matter is the portion of soil composed of living and dead materials in various states of decomposition. Soil organic matter accounts for a small fraction of soil by volume, 2 to 8%, but it's very important for the soil and the plant health. But the thing to know, after everything you hear from gardeners and information, is add organic matter, which is fine and true, but you can have too much, and excess nutrients can harm plants and cause issues to the environment as well. So what do? Well, you should have a soil test to fully understand how the materials you're adding are impacting your soil and the organic matter in that soil. So if you have not had a soil test ever, this is a good time to do one. You do not have to have a soil test done every year. Once you have a soil test, it's good for probably 3 to 5 years, depending on what you're doing in your garden. If you're doing extensive vegetable harvesting from the garden, you may want to do it more often, but I do recommend that you do one at some point to know what your levels are and what your starting point is. So hot compost is another form that we talked about in our keywords. So making hot compost, it's ready in less than 8 weeks, which sounds great. You have to turn it off and to keep the organisms working, and it's very labor intensive. You need to monitor and maintain that high temperature of 120 to 160 degrees. And to do that, you need to have a minimum size 4 cubic feet for your compost pile or container, whatever you're doing it in. It has to be minimum of 4 cubic feet. You have to build the whole pile at once, which means you have to stockpile all of the ingredients that would fill that 4 cubic feet first, and then build it all at once. And with that ratio of carbon to nitrogen, and the moisture needs to be monitored more carefully. So it's not for everybody, but for people who can do it, they get good results. Now we're talking about various types of bins. You do not have to have a bin, but by having one, it's going to keep your compost contained, and it will also help keep any rodents and pests out, as well as keep excess moisture and the elements out. So things to consider is the amount of waste your household creates, the space that you have available to put these bins, and do you want to buy it or do you want to build it yourself? But the best place will be a well-drained location that's easily accessible year-round, and it's best to be on grass or soil. This allows for those microorganisms that are in the soil that decompose things to easily find their way up into the pile. So here are some common composter styles. On the left, we have the wire bins, and these are good for storage of the brown materials that you're going to use. They also can be used as a complete composting unit. The thing with the bins is that obviously it's not going to do anything to keep out any pests. So if you're in an area where you have some of these pest issues, you're going to obviously be inviting them. The closed bins are very popular as well. They work fine, but what some people find is that they're lacking adequate air vents to have that oxygen that the organisms need to break down. And also turning it is very difficult because it's in this small confined box. As well as harvesting it, you're usually harvesting it from the door at the bottom, and you're scooping out little bits at a time. So they have some issues there. And then you have the multi-bins, and these can be made to whatever size you like. They're obviously not as neat and tidy, or this one isn't. This is the one that we have. It's now being currently rebuilt. So, and there are doors on it, but they've been taken off for the photo. But the benefit of these is you can put a lot of compost in them. So if you have a lot of yard waste, they are a good source, a good system to go with and to use. And then the other type of composter that's been very popular in the last number of years are tumblers. And tumblers come in a wide range of styles. The drawback with the tumblers is that, again, some of them are small, so you can't make a lot of compost in them, or when you do, they only have one chamber. So some of them have two chambers, like the black one, the FCMP has two chambers. So you can have your compost that you're working on in one and turning it, as well as adding new materials to the other side of the chamber. There's lots of reviews online for these tumblers, or there's lots of plans online too, either through Pinterest or Google, where you can make your own system, and you don't have to, spend the money on some of these bigger ones and make them to your specifications. The one on the right, I like the idea of it because it's easy to have it high enough that a wheelbarrow can fit underneath. So when the compost is ready, you just move it over there and dump it out. Whereas some of the tumblers that are low to the ground, what people do is put a tarp on the ground, dump the compost onto the tarp, and then drag the tarp over to the area where they want to put the compost. So those are some things to consider. The other thing that's nice about the tumblers is that because they're confined and off the ground, they're good at excluding pests. They're not good for getting hot compost because they're too small and they will not get the temperatures that you need, just because they're not, unless you have one that is going to be a size of the 4 cubic meters or feet. So avoiding problems. Well, do not compost meat, fish, dairy, oils, and grease and bones and pet waste. All of those things can go in most municipal green bin type composters, but do not put them in your own backyard composter. Weeds with mature seeds or diseased plants should also not be put in your compost. Cover the fruit and vegetable scraps with the brown, the carbon source, or bury it in the center of the pile, and this will help keep fruit flies and other pests from getting at it. Use a lid and secure the sides so that rodents find no opportunity to inhabit it. The composter in this picture is Julianne's, and it doesn't have a lid, so there's going to be easy access for animals to get in there, or the fruit flies that would be going to that apples, I think, that are on there. So that if, in this case, if some brown carbon material was added on top of that, that would help with that. Or if she had a lid, that certainly would help with that as well. So here's a couple of other methods that you should be aware of when you're getting into composting. They're not for everybody. They can be used in combination with outdoor composting for sure. Vermicomposting, that's using the red wiggler worms. You have them in bins, most often inside your house. And these are good if you have no outdoor space. So say you're in a condo or something and space is quite limited, you can still compost with the worm bins. There are limits as to what you put in it because these worms are particular as to what they want to eat. So you want to do some research so that you're keeping your worms happy. The other system that's become popular over the years is bokashi. And bokashi is a process that ferments the kitchen scraps. And the thing about that is that you can include the meat and the bones and the oils, all those things that we just said you shouldn't put in an outdoor compost. You can put them in a bokashi bin. The way that it works is you would put those ingredients in the bin on the right. You sprinkle it with some of the compost accelerator, which has special microbes in it that help start the process of fermentation. And the picture on the far right shows what it looks like after a couple of weeks in your kitchen when this is almost full and ready to be set aside. You set it aside for 2 weeks and let it continue to ferment, at which point you then take that fermented material, and it's not compost at this point, but it's well on its way into the decomposition process, and you either add that to your compost pile or you dig it into a garden area or soil on your property. The thing with it is it does not work well for high carbon materials like yard and garden waste. So again, it won't handle everything, but it's a nice add-on to a system that you might already be using. And it's very high in nutrients. Some of the spigot that you see in the bokashi bin, there'll be some leachate that comes off of that. That leachate can be used to fertilize your plants as sort of a liquid compost, but also, surprisingly enough, it can be used in your drains and things like that because it will continue to work its microbe magic in your drains and things and help keep them clean. So very interesting process to look at. So in summary, you build the base with coarse, chunky materials that will allow the air to enter from the bottom of the pile and work its way up through the pile. Keep those composting organisms happy. You cover the greens with the browns that will avoid the pests. You add soil or finished compost at any stage so that the soil organisms enter and help speed up decomposition. Soil added as a top layer will help deter pests and odors. So the very top pile, when you finished it off, put a good layer on top. And you do not have to distribute the layers evenly. That's demonstrated in my artwork there, which shows they don't have to be a level playing field there. Just as long as the greens are covered with the brown material, you're good to go. And again, remember, monitor the moisture. And you need to aerate or turn or poke holes to add the air and speed the decomposition. And that is done with either a pitchfork or there's a little tool that's used, an aerating tool. It's got collapsible wings on it that you poke that in and then pull on it. I've never used one of those myself, but there is a tool for that, or even just using metal rods sort of driven down in and anything that's going to try and get the air into it. So resources, if you're looking for more information on the basics of compost or the pests, greenactioncenter.ca is a very good source. If you want more information on the soil organic matter, the University of Minnesota has a very good article talking about the content of that and how more is not necessarily merrier. And if you're interested in getting your soil tested, this link to the OMAFRA website lists various labs in Ontario that are recommended by OMAFRA to use. And now that's the end of my presentation, and we have time for questions.
That was excellent. Thank you so much, Catherine. We don't have much time, but Rebecca, have we got any questions to forward to Catherine?
We do have a couple. So Marianne asks, how do the microorganisms reach the elevated tumbler composters?
That's a good question, Marianne. The only way that those microorganisms are going to enter is by taking a shovelful of native soil from somewhere in your yard and adding that in, or by throwing in a shovelful of finished compost from the last time that you made compost. You would save some and have them enter that way. But other than that, no, it's a closed unit and there's no natural microorganisms entering.
Interesting. So it's a little bit like having a yeast starter for sourdough bread.
Perhaps.
Compliments on your cute drawing of the compost layers from Carrie.
Thank you.
Several people saying thank you. And now we did get a couple of questions here about a soilless mix for container planting. And does that mix need to be soil tested? I think the answer to that question is probably no, but that's a good one for our Master Gardener helpline.
Sure,
Jane,
and I would go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
I was just going to say, no, I wouldn't test soil in a container. It's too small. When you take a soil test, there's instructions on the website of the company that you're going to use, and you would go around various places in your garden, take samples from these various places, you mix all of that together in one bucket, take about a cupful of that out and send it off, and from that they analyze it. So no, you wouldn't test a container for doing a soil test.
Jane is asking, does the compost pile need to be in the sun?
No, it does not need to be in the sun. If it is in the sun, you run the, it could heat it up. No, not heat it up, but it could dry it out more than you want, right? However, having it in a very shady spot is maybe not ideal either, because the only reason being that in the winter, like right now, my compost pile is in the sun and it's still frozen, and I'm, getting anxious for it to thaw out. So by having it in the sun, sure, you might run the risk of it drying out, but it's going to thaw out after the winter more quickly than if it's in a shady spot. So I would, if you can, put it where it at least gets some sun. It will still work in the shade, but those are the considerations that I would give as to how soon it's going to be ready and the effect that it's going to have on your moisture.
Karen Boivin is asking about chemicals potentially on newspapers and cardboard, and could these be harmful to the compost?
Well, I would use unprinted cardboard, like not glossy cardboard or ones with lots of labels and things like that. Just nice, plain brown cardboard boxes. Take off any tape that's on that. And then there should be no concern that way. Any newspapers that are printed these days are printed with vegetable dyes, so there would be no concern there. I wouldn't use any glossy paper like magazines or anything like that. Just try and get more of a natural source of paper. But the cardboard is a really high source of carbon when we were showing that table, and it's really good because especially in the winter when you're scrambling, if you didn't save some of the leaves, which again, save leaves in the fall when everybody is carting them to the end of the driveway to have them picked up and taken to the city composting. Those leaves are very valuable to be adding throughout the winter months to your compost.
So we have a few more questions here. Lee Valley sells a soil test kit. And somebody, Marine Odie, is asking if we have any experience with that, or would that be a recommended soil testing system?
I'm not familiar with the test kit that Lee Valley has. I will tell you that I've got my soil test. I did one. I collected the soil last year and sent it off through the winter. It cost $40 and it covers everything in it that I don't think the test kits that you buy either from, I don't know about Lee Valley's, but that you would get at garden centers and things. I don't know how accurate they are and if they're testing for all of the trace elements as well in the compost. And I had a couple of questions when I got this document back, and I contacted the company and they phoned me back, and I was able to talk to a soil scientist and have my questions answered that way. So I highly recommend that you do use a lab. I think for $40, it's well worth it. And like I said, you don't need to do it every year. And I just don't know how accurate these kits that you buy are, but I have no experience with those. So that's
Victoria wants to know, can we put plant container soil into the compost?
Absolutely, yes. It's a great source to be recycling those, whether it's a house plant, whether it's your container plants in the fall, for sure, put them back on the compost. It's a great source of those brown materials that you need, and they will do wonders in the garden. And then when you go to do your containers next year, you're good to go, adding that to it. So excellent.
We have
I'm thinking at this point, perhaps we should thank Catherine. We're running a little bit over.
Well, Catherine, this has been really interesting. There was one last question about wood ash, and I would say wood ash is good to add in small quantities, but it can be very alkaline. And our soil in Ottawa tends to be alkaline already. But Catherine,
well, and that's a very good point. Be very cautious whether you're adding wood ash to your compost or adding it to the gardens. I know many people say I've used it for years and years, but this is exactly where do a soil test and find out what you're putting on there, because wood ash will certainly alter the pH of your soil. And once it's altered, it's very difficult to get it back again. So get it tested before you put copious amounts of wood ash.
Well, you can tell from the number of questions, this was a really popular topic. Catherine, thank you so much. To those folks whose questions we didn't get to, and there were a few of them, I would strongly recommend that you contact our Master Gardener helpline, and someone will get back to you usually within 24 hours with a full response in writing, and you'll have that for your records. Thank you again, Catherine. That was terrific.
Oh, good. It was my pleasure. There was a few technical glitches there, but I think it went off not too badly. So thank you everyone for tuning in. And yes, if you've got more questions, send them to the helpline.